Hello, everyone, wherever you may be, and welcome to Coalition Conversations, brought to you by the Coalition of Community College Architecture Programs. This broadcast is based on the conference held in June 2024, What We Teach, How They Learn. The conference was sponsored and held at Montgomery College at their Silver Spring, Maryland campus, and was also sponsored by the National Council of Architectural Registration Boards and the American Institute of Architects. Today, we bring you a super guest to start our program with, the founder of the coalition, or CCAP, Ms. Randy Steiner, FAIA. Randy holds a bachelor's from the University of Pennsylvania in History of Art and Architecture and a master's in architecture from Washington University in St. Louis. Her experience includes working as a White House liaison with the National Park Services, managing construction and restoration for the residents and grounds. She has been an architect in the Virginia, Maryland, and DC area, working on projects ranging from farmhouses to townhouses and project assessments. She began her career at Montgomery College in Rockville, Maryland, and in the process created the coalition. Her colleagues value her so much that in a letter for her to receive the fellow AIA, Ms. Helen Combs Drilling, FAIA, and former 2014 AIA president said, "More than any single member of the AIA, Randy Steiner has influenced the demographic diversity of students entering our profession, some of which are now candidates that have a myriad of leadership positions that form the basis of their career accomplishments. A fewer number have one singular achievement that sets them apart for a lifetime or lifetimes. A contribution to our profession of such significance that it will positively affect our collective trajectory for years to come." Such is the case with Randy, who founded the Coalition of Community College Architecture Programs in 2012. Please welcome Ms. Randy Steiner.
Welcome, everyone. We have the marvelous Randy Steiner with us today, telling us a little bit or a lot of bit about CCAP. So Randy, thank you for joining us today.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I love when you call it CCAP. It's CCCAP, right? It's a funny way. It's and actually even how it came up with his name, there's a kind of funny story to that as well.
Fantastic. So can you tell us about it?
Yeah. So as sitting by myself, frustrated about the fact that my students were not getting their credits transferring to University of Maryland. I'm here in Montgomery College in Rockville, Maryland, which is outside of Washington, DC. My effort to create this, find out how do other community colleges transfer their credits. And I thought naively, oh, I'll just call them all up and find out, and I'll convince Maryland that they should take my students. So the long story that spins around is that it took me about 2 years to identify where the community colleges in the country had architecture programs. And then within those programs, who was a contact? You know, I didn't want to do info at El Paso. It had to be Ken Gorski at El Paso Community, CC,
Right.
DEDU. So coming up with this, sending out this survey, that's a wonderful story. And the fact that I sent out an Excel spreadsheet, in 2012, I thought I'll just get these answers, how people are getting their credits to transfer. And interestingly enough, I threw in other questions, how many full-time faculty, how many students are in your program, how much does it cost? When does your program, how many of your students actually transfer? I think I had like 60 questions. It did take me another year and a half to get responses. I was rather naive, thinking I'll send it out and everybody will just respond and say, oh, that's nice. And instead, all of us are busy, busy, busy. And reading a survey by somebody you don't know is like, yeah, forget it. I did end up getting 122 out of 165 programs.
Wow.
And a lot of that was, I'm relentlessly persevering. I just kept digging and finding other ways to contact these people. So how did the CCCAP come? Well, I wanted to be community college architecture programs, and I couldn't figure out, we're not an association. So I just want us to coexist, and coalition seemed like the most appropriate way of calling it. But that is what we are. We are the CCCAP, yes, or the 3CAP, whatever you want to call us.
So you started with the intent of getting your students' credits transferred.
Totally.
And you had no clue you were going to be doing the coalition.
No, it wasn't. My intention was literally, if I could get a bunch of schools to tell me how they got their credits to transfer, I was just going to proceed in this manner. I came into teaching like many of us. The economy was in a hole. My husband and I are both architects. We had 3 small children. My husband didn't have a lot of work. I was doing residential design. I decided one of us had to get like a real job with the insurance. I looked in the Washington Post and saw that this place called Montgomery College was looking to hire a temporary full-time faculty to teach architecture. I had no idea that they taught architecture in community college. Really didn't have a great sense of what a community college is. Okay, so there's my bias right there. Took the job, got hired very quickly because they were looking for someone in December to hire them to start in January. I realized this is exactly where I should be. I loved the students. I loved the concept. By nature, an optimistic person who wants everyone to join in and benefit and get the best they can. So the fact that community colleges were full of students who weren't necessarily optimistic about themselves, didn't have high expectations many times. Many times I think they were harder on themselves than they needed to be. And so this was like it checked every box that I could have. I also didn't have a lot of faculty telling me what to do because there was only 2 people in the department. And so I just kind of blindly went ahead and took students on field trips. I didn't know that I had to get permission to get in the car with them. And had visitors come, architects come and talk to them. I didn't know that you need to have permission and honorariums. I just kind of kept blindly moving ahead. And actually, Emmanuel, I think that's pretty much how even the coalition came ahead. It's like, just keep pushing until someone says you can't. But the result of my survey, which was very disappointing, because I think maybe 7 out of the 122 responses said there was any relationship with a school of architecture, was this overwhelming statistic I really wasn't looking for originally. I didn't know it existed, that 34% of the students who graduated these programs at community college architecture programs self-identified as minority. And I don't mean gender-wise, I just meant culture, racial. I knew that in architecture school, that was not the case. And subsequently, I learned that it was like less than 7% of architecture programs in ACSA schools in 2012, 7% were minority. So it was like, what? Of course that exists, because they're in a community college for all the reasons that they start, right? We both know, kids start in community college for all sorts of reasons. We both, anyone in a community college knows it. You don't need to have someone tell you. But when they graduate, they are amazing, devoted, enthusiastic, dedicated future architects.
Yes.
So starting the coalition was I didn't get any response. It didn't help me at all get into University of Maryland, but it damn well got me motivated that this was wrong and this had to be changed. Subsequently, in my persistence, I live in Washington, D.C. area. So I contacted my local senator to ask him what he could do. Well, he said, why don't you call the Department of Education? So I made an appointment in the office of the Department of Education. I was going to tell him, this is racial, this is discrimination. Well, nobody would really talk to me there. Someone said, you need to speak to organizations that deal with art, with colleges. On a whim, I contacted the National Architectural Accreditation Board, which accredits schools of architecture. I only knew about them because this person from the education department suggested that. And it turned out they embraced me when I asked them to help me out and to talk about this. And it turned out the president at the time was Ted Landsmark from Boston Architectural College. They suggested, he and Andrea Rutledge, who was executive director, said, I'll tell you what, every 5 years, the NAAB has to re-accredit how they're going to set the standards for architecture schools. That happens every 5 years. And we're going to be meeting in 6 months. So why don't you get all those community college architecture programs you're talking about to come to Washington, meet with you, and find out what you can team up. I was like, okay. And I did just that. The AIA National gave us space. 22 different faculty from across the country came. We had dinner at my house. And the intention was, I want to share with them, what can we do? What can we say to the NAAB that the NAAB will then say to schools of architecture, in order to stay accredited, you need to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So although we met, it was amazing. We set up a board, we set up a mission statement, and eventually 6 months later, I was invited to the NAAB's national meeting. It was in Snowbird, Utah. I was invited to just come. I couldn't speak because I didn't have a vote, but just being there made a big difference. And the suggestions we made, none of them got followed up. But that's okay, because we were there. I was there. And people who never met somebody from a community college architecture program kind of saw, isn't a nice lady. She's not meaning any harm. And every time I'd speak, there was a lot of just educating the public, just like me. I had to be educated. I didn't know about community colleges. So, I had a privileged education. I went to University of Pennsylvania, undergraduate, Washington University for my graduate degree. So I had a very privileged private education. And I realized that that same education can be given in a community college. It doesn't have to be Ivy League.
I also went to state school, but I remember when I was in high school, my drafting teacher told me not to go to community college. He said the program there is not going to be worth your while. Start off at UTEP, which is the University of Texas at El Paso, and then transfer to an architecture school, because back then we didn't have this school. So the perception of community colleges has also changed quite a bit, has it not? Have you seen that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have. I think that a lot of us still have this feeling like nobody gets excited and calls you and says, guess what, my kid got into Montgomery College, right? It's open enrollment. They will call you up and say, guess what, my kid got into Harvard. I think, though, that students are looking around and realizing, wow, this is a lot of money. I don't think I thought about the money as much as now. The money is so expensive, and kids are like, I don't, can I really put this burden on my parents or myself? Maybe Jill Biden helped the community college also. I don't know.
So your findings was that even the community colleges were not responsive to your survey?
Well, I think that the persistence, I think, was some of the questions I was asking, for instance, what's the racial breakdown in your program? How many students do you graduate? I know in my own school, that information can be held very close to the registrar. Sometimes they don't want to share that. It wasn't like, and I don't know about your experience at El Paso, but it wasn't like I could just check and see how many students had different racial backgrounds or how many students were male or female. I could do that by literally looking at my classes, and I was the coordinator of the architecture program at the time, and I could sit there and add the numbers, but it wasn't like it was open data available to me. And so, when you're a faculty member, the last thing you want to do is answer some survey but once I contacted people personally, and Emmanuel, I think that's what it's always been about, is calling and getting a voice and talking to someone personally or setting up an email conversation, like even how you and I, first met. It's kind of like, oh, I trust that person. Oh, this is person sincere. She doesn't have, it's not a scam. This is her motivations are what my motivations are. I think it's a lot of a burden to ask a faculty member to do all this. If you could go to the registrar or to institutional advancement, which has all these numbers. I mean, they have all this data. They're many times reluctant to share that data outside of their school. I know my own school was at one time sued by the NAB, they were sued because they announced information about racial breakdown and it was considered discriminatory. It turned
Really?
out, it was a false suit and it didn't go anywhere. But I think my school was very nervous and anxious. They didn't want to give information out.
That's
I
interesting.
think a lot of schools have that. State schools have a lot of, it's supposed to be transparent, but it can sometimes be very difficult to get into that information. So when we got together, there was so much energy in the room. It was just amazing to realize that we now have something to work towards. And we all, I had a whole list of what I wanted to see, but I also realized this had to be all of us, not me. It's always got to be a team, a coalition, not one person dominating the conversation. And so the idea of having a design competition, the student design competition, from the very get-go, the very first time we met was like, this is something we can do. And so we did. We had our first design competition in 2014, and gradually that design competition attracted a lot of community college architecture programs. And like, oh, well, I can use this. I can use it just in a studio. I don't have to do their competition. I also wrote a newsletter that I put out every month with news and questions. And did you know this? And that was a lot of work.
That's a lot. That sounds like a lot of work.
It was a lot of work.
All by yourself too.
I was devoted to this. I wasn't giving up.
Yeah. We love your dedication. we really do. That's why, Joe and I and everybody, that's why we're there, because we love your dedication and your devotion to this. And you pass it on to us and we feel energized. And
this is not an easy profession. It's not an easy profession to get through, and then go to all that school and then take exams and then work on a team. And I mean, but it is the most rewarding and stimulating profession I can imagine. I mean, I can't imagine being anything except an architect.
I agree. I completely agree. What are some of the changes that you've seen with that the coalition has been able to make? I know that one of those is our partnership or our relationship with NCARB.
Yeah.
What have you seen?
A good question. When we set that mission statement in 2012, we wanted to provide, I think our mission statement is to support and promote the education of students of all backgrounds at the community college level and the faculty as well. So we didn't say we want to get transfers, or we didn't say a specific thing. It was just a support. And I think what I see now, one reason why I felt like, oh, it's okay, it's time for someone else to, lead this organization, was we are acknowledged now by architectural schools across the country. We're no longer this irritant, don't pay attention to them, that kid's never going to transfer. We don't have to take those kids. I think we got to acknowledge that we exist. Not only that, but that our students have quality. Once a student from a community college gets into an architecture program, that was what we needed to first do, just get them in the room, like in the room where it happens. And then I think at the same time, then getting the ACSA to acknowledge that we're not a stepchild, we're a stepping stone. For NCARB, I think, Harry Falconer was always eager to do whatever he could to expand the number of people getting an architectural education. I have to say we should give a lot of credit to John Baker, who, as a non-graduate of an architecture school, once he came on board, that was mind-boggling, his acknowledgement, because there wasn't a lot of love there before that. They supported us, but they didn't come any closer than that.
There was a lot of resistance too, even when John Baker was on. I heard a lot of,
I think so.
not so nice things.
I think the other thing that has happened is that the AIA, I've been a member of the AIA for a long time. I know that it was an elitist, all male, white organization and a lot of golf games. But to support them is to support the fact that somebody lobbies for our profession. The lawyers have a strong lobbying organization. Doctors have a strong lobbying organization. Unions, have strong lobbying. And as architects, we're just not very good at promoting ourselves. And we just want people to leave us alone, let us do what we do. And so I've been a long time supporter of the fact that the AIA does that. And I got involved in my local chapter and then my state chapter and then on national committees. And I think it was important for the AIA to learn about community college architecture programs. That was a big thing to have them get on board. And they always supported us. I mean, our first conferences were at AIA conventions and they gave us a room and we didn't pay for it. I admire that about the AIA. So I think that's a change that people were not expecting, this elitist. One of the interesting things that survey showed was there is a greater percentage of community college faculty, architecture faculty, who are members of the AIA, whether they're associates or they're registered architects, than there aren't in architecture schools, because we are academics, but we have a very vocational technical direction. We didn't say when we finished architecture school, I want to teach architecture in an architecture school. And most of us just kind of fell into a community college teaching architecture. I turned around and like, oh wow, I'm doing this full time now.
Did you feel like there was going to be a little bit more support from the universities to transfer students over, or did you think that it was more of a kind of a show?
Oh, you cynic, you. You cynic. I had met with Michael Monti, who's the executive director of the ACSA, I think like in 2013. And we had a nice cup of coffee and he thought, this is nice. Why don't you all just sign up and pay dues to the ACSA? It was like, well, what do we get for that? Well, not much. We couldn't be on their competitions. We couldn't be on the board. We couldn't be on committees. We couldn't make presentations. And their presentations are all very esoteric and didn't seem relevant anyway. But being persistent, just keep nudging and bugging and being persistent and inviting people from the ACSA to come to our conferences, to come and talk to us. In 2017, we met in Austin. We had a 2-day conference. She was the incoming president of the ACSA, and she gave she's from University of Illinois, I think at Champaign. She gave an amazing 90-point thing about what we could do to get closer to the ACSA, the architecture schools. And so I think being there and being in the AIA and making a voice be known, and any opportunity, I made a presentation at AIA National Convention in Atlanta, any opportunity to speak, and then people become familiar with your name and then the community college architecture programs. So I think a lot of this is just slowly bleeding into the profession, but it was a way of acknowledging that we existed and just kind of continuing to filter in. I think it's a slow process of filtering.
Yeah.
Making people aware. And I know you're really good at that. You're really good at that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, all right. Is there anything else you think we should talk about the coalition?
I would love to see in the future that more of the community college architecture programs became dues paying members, because I feel a little bit like we've spent all these years supporting you, all of you out there, and only 40 out of 122, pay dues and participate. And yet we still support you. I mean, we support you, we're working for you. But the we here is just a bunch of faculty members like you and Joe and Charlie. There is no paid staff here. We're not some large, there's no office building with our name on it. I wish that more would come forward and just support us in terms of paying dues so that we can continue to exist as an organization.
All right. Well, thank you, Randy. Thank you for your time. And thank you, audience, for listening. And I hope to see you somewhere out there.
I will tell you, my motto has always been, if I had a mantra, my motto would be, if you're not sitting on the edge, you're taking up too much room.
Wonderful. Thank you, Randy.
Bye-bye. Nice to talk to you, Emmanuel. It was great. It was fun.
A super big thanks to our guest, Ms. Randy Steiner, FAIA. And thank you for joining our program. We will follow up with a one-on-one live conversation for CCAP members on a private virtual call, where you will be able to ask questions and express your thoughts. If you are not a member and wish to be a part of the conversation and the coalition, contact us. We are eager to hear from you. Until next time, enjoy life to the fullest.
You